Hello guys, welcome back to the channel for a new Databricks and Azure DevOps video. Today we're going to continue where we left off when we discussed about Databricks Asset Bundles and Azure DevOps Pipelines. I'm going to summarize very briefly what we did last time when we discussed about Databricks Asset Bundles and Azure DevOps Pipelines, but our main focus would be the new capabilities the things that we can do with Databricks Asset Bundles. For example, how to parameterize your Databricks Asset Bundles and pass parameters from Azure DevOps to your Databricks notebooks, how you can execute DDL statements and create tables and views in your Databricks environments via Databricks Asset Bundles, how to run your Databricks jobs the way you want, and how to trigger the DevOps production pipeline on completion of the dev pipeline. For more details about Databricks Asset Bundles, please check the previous videos because now we are going to concentrate on these extra capabilities. So let's jump into the code. Okay guys, we are in our Azure DevOps environment and here I have the whole project. Now, first let's check the Databricks YAML file which contains the asset bundle definition. Now, if you go here into the documentation, you will see add a bundle configuration file to the project named databricks.yaml, and here they define the bundle name, the jobs, the targets, etc., etc. Here they define the jobs here in the Databricks YAML file. For us, the only difference is that we have defined the jobs in a separate YAML file, which is under this dab_templates folder, and here we have defined all our jobs. But in our Databricks YAML file, we use the include tag, we include all the YAML files here, and then we have the variables that we define here in our Databricks YAML file. It's necessary to define these variables here in this Databricks YAML file if you want to pass the parameters in your Databricks notebooks. And then we define the root path, the targets, dev and prod we have only, and here we use Poetry to build a library. We don't use the setup tools and we are using Poetry instead. Now there is in the documentation, as you can see in this tutorial, they update the projects bundle to use Poetry instead of setup tools and setup py and requirements txt. So they use Poetry. We went through this Poetry installation in the previous videos. Please check them out. But instead of setup tools, you use Poetry to install your dependencies, and here we pass the will package to the workspace with these tags here: sync, include, etc., etc. Now in the pyprojects.toml here in this file we declare the dependencies and in the packages that we want to build our Python will. And here, as you can see, from source, this source folder, we include the framework folder, and under this framework folder we have two folders that contain one contains Python code and one contains YAML definitions. For example, here we have example 1_columns. We have the column names and the data types for these columns. And here in our py function, we use read_YAML function, safe load, to load this metadata.yaml file and get the data types for these columns. Also, we have defined a function here that returns all these things. Please check the previous videos in order to understand. We went through all these things in the previous videos in more detail. Now, in our notebooks, here we have our notebooks. The first one contains the DDL statement. For example, you want to create a table, right? And then use this table in your code. But first, you need to create a table. What can you do? You can create the SQL definition, the SQL statement. You create the table if you drop the table if it exists, and then you create the table and insert some values. Now, You can use also PySpark, and if you don't want to drop the table, you say if the table exists, don't do anything, just leave it. But if you want to drop the table, use the drop command here and then create a table and insert some values. You just do this, you can play around and see what you can do with all these things. But here is just an SQL statement to create a table, and then we can use this table in our second notebook, this example 1 PY, and here, as you can see, we have defined the schema and the data. We create a simple data frame here, right here, with this data and schema, right? And then we append the data in this demo table that we created here in the first step. So it will, the jobs will run sequentially. Example 1 job will run only when the demo underscore table SQL job runs, and then example 2 runs when example 1 is completed successfully, right? So let's go back to example 1. The first thing that I'm going to point out here is that we import from our Python wheel, we import these functions here with YAML and get Spark type mapping. There is no actual business meaning behind these functions. I just wanted to show you from a technical perspective how you define a Python, how you build and define a Python wheel using pointry, and then use it in your Databricks code. So you import from framework.commonfunctions.metadata functions. As you can see here the py file, and we import the functions here, and then we print the results. And then the last thing I want to point here, and the main thing of this tutorial, is how you pass parameters from Azure DevOps to your Databricks notebooks, right? How can you do that? Let's go back to our Databricks YAML file. And here, remember, we define the variables. That's very, very important. You have to define the variables that you want to pass to your notebooks in your Databricks.yaml file. Here we have defined 3 variables, name underscore prefix. You provide the default value, the description, and environment name. The default value is dev, and the Databricks version. We have I have created 2 Databricks components, one for dev, one for prod. So we have different Databricks environments. And here the default value is Databricks dev, right? And so first you have to define the variables here, then you go where you have defined your job. So let's say that the first job is the DDL statement, right? The DDL pipeline, which points to this DDL statement here, to this notebook. And how you can see that, under task key we have notebook task, notebook path, and here is the path that points to this notebook. And then we define the job cluster, okay, and then we define the parameters. So the parameters are the 3 parameters that we defined in our Databricks.yaml here. As you can see them, you can see the same parameters here, right? The only thing is here you use the parameters tag, then the name, you provide the name of the parameter, which is name underscore prefix, and the default value here, it's $, you open bracket var dot name prefix, right? And you close the brackets. The same for environment name, and the same for Databricks version. So you pass these 3 parameters to your job, and then you can use them in your notebooks. Now, in our example, we only use them in the example 1 pipeline notebook, and here the same, we point to the example 1 py file, which is our second notebook. We also install the Python wheel that we are going to create. We define the job cluster, right? And then we pass the parameters, name prefix, environment name, and Databricks version. Now, you pass those things, right? How can you get those values that you pass in your notebook? So here that you have your notebook, you need to use dbutils widget. You define the environment name, name prefix, Databricks version, and then you use dbwidgets.get, and you get the values and you print them. We are going to see that in a little bit, but here is how you can pass the values from Azure DevOps to your notebooks using widgets actually, and define them in your Databricks YAML file here. In your bundle, where you define the jobs, you pass them as parameters, right? But there is one last place that you have to define them. So in your Azure DevOps pipeline, you have to use this parameters tag again here, right? And then provide the name, which is the name prefix. You provide the default values. Here is actually the values that you want to provide, right? We have demo_dev, demo_prod, Databricks version, the default is Databricks dev, and we have also prod. Here we have values, as you can see. If you don't want to provide multiple values, just remove this tag here, the values tag, and just use the default tag, right? Then we have environment name as well, service connection name, and key vault name. Now how can we pass these three variables, name underscore prefix, Databricks version, and environment name? How can you pass them to your asset bundles? And here is actually how you can do them. Let me uncomment this code because I forgot that. And here, as you can see, let's go here at the bottom. You can see we have Databricks bundle validate. We pass the environment name, which is the dev environment, and then we have Databricks bundle deploy. We deploy in the dev environment, we deploy the Databricks asset bundle, but here, as you can see, we have --var, and then here we provide we pass the parameters, name underscore prefix. We use $, double brackets, parameters, dot name prefix. The same for environment name, the same for Databricks version, right? And here this is how you pass the parameters. The name prefix here, and this is how you pass the parameter, but notice we have parameters dot name prefix. You can find them up here. Name prefix, Databricks version, environment name, which is the Azure DevOps pipeline. Now you will tell me why we have to define those variables also in the Databricks YAML, because that's how it works. So you have to define them in multiple places, and here you use -- variable and you pass the variables, and that's why in our jobs, as you can see, we use var dot name prefix, because here in our DevOps pipeline, this is how we pass them using var name prefix and environment name and Databricks version. And this is how then this is passed to your notebooks from this job here, job definition that you pass the parameters. This is how you can then pass them in your notebook and use widgets to get the values, right? So first step, in the Databricks YAML file, we define the variables we want to pass to our Databricks asset bundle. Then in our Azure DevOps pipeline, we define them here, right, under parameters, and then when we deploy the bundle, in the bundle deploy, we pass them as variables here, right? And then in our jobs, we define them as parameters, again, with using var.name prefix, and the last step is to use them in the code using widgets. I know it's a lot to take in, but this is how you can do it. But there are three places that you define them as parameters. One that in one place you also provide the default value, all the optional values here in our Azure DevOps pipeline, and then in the last step we use them in our Databricks notebooks using widgets. Very, very important. Okay, so now that we defined how we can pass parameters, which is extremely important in real life projects, and here that we have our notebook with our DDL statements, right? Now what's the next step? The next step is to check again how we have defined the jobs. The first job we have defined here is the DDL pipeline, which points to this notebook with the SQL statements, right? The second job is points to this notebook here, right? Again, we pass the parameters, and then we also have a scheduler, right? So here, we also have a scheduler here. In the DDL pipeline, we don't have a scheduler. We want it to run one time, because you don't run the DDL statements multiple times, you run them one time. But in the notebooks that we have all the logic that we want it to run, every now and then, you define a scheduler here. And then you define you point to the right notebook. Apparently, you define the job cluster, the parameters the same. And the last thing we have here is, the example 2 pipeline. This is the last pipeline that points to this Python file, this Python notebook. So we have 3 jobs. The first one creates the DDL, runs the DDL statements. The second one runs code, and the third one runs code as well. And we are going to run them sequentially. Now, again, we're going to run the DDL statement only one time, right? So we can use a new job which combines all the pipelines, all the other jobs actually, and run them the way we want. So for example, here we define the task, we define the task key, and then we use the tag run_job_task, and then we define the job ID, which is resources jobs DDL pipeline ID. So it's going to run the pipeline which is here, right? Resources jobs DDL pipeline and the ID. We have to pass the ID dynamically because the ID will change every time we deploy, right? And then we run this the second pipeline when the first one runs successfully with the DDL statements, and then again we use the resources.jobs. The pipeline name.id, and the same for the last job, which depends on the previous job, right? Now bear in mind that this is a kind of recent fix from the Databricks side of things. It didn't work I think last year. Now it's working fine. So you use the ID and you run the job, right? Perfect. Now let's go to our pipelines. What we have to do, I have defined already a dev pipeline, right? So if I click on edit, here is we have defined a pipeline that points to the demo-dev.yaml, right? And here you have to click on the variables, provide the variables for the keyboard and the service connection in order to connect to run our Azure DevOps pipelines, right? I have already done that. Now, if we run this code, it should deploy all these jobs and trigger the combined pipeline, right? And let's run this job. And here, as you can see in the parameters, when we provide options, you have these options here. You can select. Now the default option is demo_dev. In the Databricks version is the dev, and environment is the dev. So we run this, and now let it run. But in the meantime, let's go back to our repos, and in our Azure pipelines, in the prod pipeline, we have copied exactly the same. The only difference with the dev pipeline is here that I have provided the Databricks prod URL and the Databricks prod token, which is coming as a secret from the key vault. That's why we provided here we use key vault and get all the secrets, because there we store the URL, Databricks URL, and the Databricks token. And also here we define the same parameters with different default values, right? Demo_prod, Databricks prod, right here, prod environment, but exactly the same thing. The only difference is here we're using resources, pipelines, pipeline. Just choose a name for the trigger and then source, the source pipeline, which is the demo_dev right here. And then the branch that we want to monitor, and it triggers the production pipeline. So when we trigger like we did the demo dev pipeline, it's going to run everything, and then if on completion, if it runs successfully, it's going to trigger this prod pipeline and deploy to prod, and this is what we want. So as you can see here now, validate bundle, and it's running the combined pipelines command job. So if we go our dev environment, as you can see, we deployed 4 jobs. The 3 jobs here, 2 are scheduled with the logic. So the logic, these notebooks are scheduled, so they will run every few hours. And the first job, the DDL pipeline job, will run only once, because we don't want to repeat running the DDL statements. And the combined pipelines job, as you can see here, runs the DDL job, and then the example 1 job and the example 2 job, and this is how you can do it. And once all those jobs finish, then it will trigger the prod pipeline, and it's going to deploy to prod as well. Let's wait. It will take a few minutes, because actually it takes a few minutes to spin up the cluster, but then I will return later and show you how it triggers the production pipeline. Okay guys, so as you can see, all the jobs are almost done. First we run the DDL job, so if we click here, you can see that we created the table, we inserted the records, right? Now if we go back to the job here, the first job, example 1, ran fine. As you can see, we printed all the data that we got from our functions that we defined in the Python wheel, and this is how you can use your Python wheel and insert the functions and import the functions you want in your notebooks. And here are the values that we passed from Azure DevOps here. Environment name, dev, name prefix, demo_dev, and Databricks version, Databricks-dev. This is the parameters that we defined here in our Azure pipelines. Under parameters, this is the default values that we passed, right? Now let's go back to the jobs, and here we are expecting, example 2 also run, right? It didn't do anything extraordinary here, exactly the same things, but I'm going to show you how to define the jobs sequentially create the job that runs other jobs, right? So I think it's pretty nifty that you can do that. And also notice here that the 2 jobs here with the business logic are scheduled. So these jobs will continue to run again and again in the near future, and this one it's not going to run with the DDL statements, because we don't want to repeat running DDL statements again and again. So let's go back to our pipelines. As you can see now, the dev pipeline was finished successfully, and it triggered the prod pipeline. So if we go here, if we check, now again it's doing the same thing. And let's go to our Databricks environment, in our workflows, in the prod environment. As you can see here, we have demo_prod pipeline 1, demo_prod pipeline 2, and let's wait to run the DDL statement and run the jobs and see what we get. We will need, when we print the tables, we expect to see the prod values of these parameters. Let's wait. Okay guys, so let's see what we get in the prod environment. First we run the DDL job, of course, apparently. Now we created the table again. Give it a second. Yep, we inserted 3 records, so let's go back. Then we run pipeline 1, and here this is what we're going to see. We're going to see the output here, right? And here, as you can see, the parameters are prod, demo_prd, and Databricks prod, right? And this is how you can parameterize your Databricks asset bundles and pass parameters that would need to be the same parameter names, but with different values in dev, in staging, in QA, and in prod. And this is how you can do it. Job 2 hasn't finished yet, but it doesn't do anything significant, so it doesn't really matter. But this is it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video and you learned something. I know it's very technical. It's even difficult for me to describe all those things. You need to spend time checking the code. I'm going to upload the code on GitHub so you can take a look and play around and see what we did in this tutorial. If you like the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.